Hello and welcome to the latest in a series of compilation videos I've been doing through December and January of old videos that no one watched back then, which people seem to be watching a lot more now. I've put them in compilation form. This is funny cartoons from around the world. Basically America and then like Belgium because of Asterisk, I think. But apart from that, if you go, what about this? The chances are it's on a different compilation. Danger Mouse, Count Duckula and things like that will be on the British compilation. And there's a link somewhere where you can have a look at them. But yes, thanks for joining me. It's nice to see lots of people looking at my old videos because I put a lot of effort into them and it was a bit underwhelming when only about 50 people watched them back in 2018. So yes, thank you, and I'll see you at the end. If you've not kept up with children's television since you started getting old and fat and grey like me, then you probably don't know, but every 15 seconds they seem to release a new series of Scooby-Doo, and they replace the dated clothes of the 60s on the cast with other clothes that will also date horribly at some point. Scooby-Doo originally appeared on American screens in 1969, and it featured 4 teenagers, Fred, Daphne, Velma and Shaggy, and of course the eponymous Mutt, as they disprove the existence of ghosts who are actually just cynical con men trying to extort money out of people. If Terika Cora saw the Dream Machine turn up, I think he'd be running to the hills faster than Mo Farah in slippers down a greased slide, personally. On top of the almost infinite mountain of Scooby-Doo series, there has been numerous Buffy starring movies and weird crossovers with the WWE, with Batman, and with the Addams Family. There were 2 Spectrum games, and the reason we're only covering the first one and not Scooby and Scrappy-Doo is either because nobody likes Scrappy-Doo, or because I'm going to be doing a top 10 on High-Tech's vast array of budget animated adaptations soon. Which is it out of those 2? I mean, I know the second one seems a little bit specific, but come on, it's because nobody likes Scrappy-Doo, isn't it? Scooby-Doo in the Castle Mystery was developed in 1986 by Gargoyle Games for Elite and was released on the Spectrum, the Amstrad, the Commodore 64 and the Commodore Plus 4. The scope of the game was originally much grander than the platformer we got. Press releases and screenshots from early publicity revealed that the original idea was to make the title an interactive cartoon, a bit like Dragon's Lair, which on a Spectrum 48K with no memory and tape loader sounds extremely ambitious, and so it proved to be. In the game we actually received, we got your standard platform fare, with the cowardly Great Dane on a quest to rescue his human mates from a series of glass bottles in a gargantuan haunted castle. Or not haunted, as ghosts aren't ever real in the Scooby-Doo mythos. Some of these costumes must be pretty uncomfortable for the villainous crooks inside them, however. The game takes some liberties with the title character, with Scooby seemingly sewing back on his bravery balls taken from his neutered body as a yapping pup, because he actually attacks the ghouls instead of running away. His attack is very relaxed, however. Rather than attempt to savage the ghosts with his slavering Great Dane Moor, he just sort of camply bats at them with a paw while stamping his foot. The animation and graphics are pretty good in general. There's some love in the artwork of the sprites of both Scooby and the denizens of the castle. The 9 out of 10 given by your Sinclair seems a little inflated, but it's not far off that, in fairness. Crash similarly gave Shaggy's dog story, do you see, Shaggy's dog, a high score of 91%. It's a competently put together title then, and an excellent chance to break out my god-awful Scooby-Doo impression. Shaggy, help! It's not great, is it? But no, it's a good game. I recommend it. Give it a go. If I was to stop you in the street and ask you to think of an animation studio, first you'd probably think about telling me to go away or feel vaguely threatened. The second thing you might do is think of Hanna-Barbera. Alright, Disney. But after that, it would be Alright, Pixar. Okay then, the third one would be Studio Ghibli. Studio Ghibli, fine. The fourth animation, DreamWorks. Totally forgot about them. The fifth one would be Fuzzy Door, Blue Sky, Gracie Films, Cartoon Network. Okay, at some point you'd think of the Flintstones, Yogi Bear and Scooby-Doo, and you'll feel terrible for ruining this intro, which otherwise was brilliant. Stupid independent thought processes. Can you not ruin it for once? Anyway, look, let's pretend that the first studio you thought of was Hanna-Barbera, and then we can start this again properly, yeah? It's a video about Hanna-Barbera after all, and it's about the budget Spectrum games put out by the software house High Tech. Well, High Tech Software were founded in 1988 by David A. Palmer. Initially, the team was made up of three men: David Thompson, Richard Rambo Morton, and Gary Antcliffe. The team had previously worked for Virgin Mastertronic, but felt that they wanted to go and branch out on their own. And so High Tech would develop some games, they'd commission some games, and they'd publish a shed ton of titles too. Sharing an office with sister company PAL Developments, High Tech started out with a few non-licensed titles like Future Bike Simulator in 1990, but it was to limited success. It wasn't until deals were struck with King Productions, who were behind the Defenders of the Earth franchise, Warner Brothers and their Looney Tunes characters, and yes, Hanna-Barbera, that the money really began to roll in for High Tech. Pitching the majority of the Hanna-Barbera releases at pocket money prices of $2 and $3.99 saw High Tech become regular fixtures of the Spectrum chart for their short lifespan. The Hanna-Barbera characters were instantly recognisable to legions of children with not much money to spend, and so you can see how this might have happened. The deal was simple for High Tech. Hanna-Barbera would provide High Tech with storyboards and videos, and would have a final veto on any graphics or design that they didn't like. They, for instance, weren't allowed to kill any of the characters. If Hong Kong Phooey or Yogi ran out of energy, then they had to sit down or pop off screen. They weren't allowed to use soundtracks from the shows, as Hanna-Barbera themselves didn't own the rights, so you wouldn't get a digital reproduction of any of those famous theme tunes like the Hong Kong Phooey theme or Scooby-Doo. Some of the characters are better known than others. Yogi, Wacky Racers and Scooby-Doo need no introduction to most of us, but Potsworth and Company and Rough and Ready may do in 2019. I'll try and give a brief overview of each show as we count down the High Tech Hanna-Barbera Spectrum library, from the worst reviewed average score to the best in the big three Spectrum magazines: Crash, Your Sinclair and Sinclair User. Yep, you don't have to worry about my opinion in this video. If you're wondering where certain Hanna-Barbera titles are, well, it's because they're not made by High Tech, so you won't see the likes of Scooby-Doo in the Castle Mystery. Yes, there's a link at the top of the screen if you want to watch my video on that. Likewise, if you're wondering where Defenders of the Earth or Roadrunner are, well, they're not here because they're not Hanna-Barbera cartoons. First off, a special mention for Augie Doggy, my son, my son. That's a bad impression of Doggy Daddy. who was a character in the show. Yes, there was a few adverts for this, but it was never released. So here's a few screen grabs from the Commodore 64 version. My boy, my boy. Enough of that. Bottom of the list is Wacky Races, which I couldn't locate a review of online from any of the main Spectrum magazines. So alas, Wacky Races finishes bottom. Wacky Races was all about the villainous pair of Darcy and Muttley and their attempts to win a race that was, yes indeed, quite wacky. And they would attempt to win by cheating and trying to nobble a collection of other Hanna-Barbera creations. It's a platform game in a car, which is quite novel, and it plays a bit like a simpler Kickstart. It's fine, and it's far from the worst on this list, but rules are rules, even though I made them up. Ah, silly old me. Yogi Bear and Friends in the Grebe Monster, a treasure hunt. And I think we will need a little lay down after that title. That's a hot mess. It's sort of like a high-tech stroke Hanna-Barbera Avengers, I guess. Look, Oggy Doggy, Top Cat, Quick Draw McGraw, a pantheon of gods in animation. Unlike Avengers, it's completely trash. The Yogi sprite from Yogi's Great Escape is placed in a flick screen maze, and he has to rescue all his missing friends while hurling sweets around. The other non-Yogi characters barely feature, and the simplistic gauntlet-style game just isn't a lot of fun to play. Save that pocket money for something else, 80s time-travelling child. Yogi Bear and Friends gets a miserable 58% overall. Oh well. Number 10. Top Cat. He cleans his testicles, Top Cat. He licks his genitals. Cat self-cleaning parody ditties aside, Top Cat is very similar to the previous title on the list. The flick screen maze game genre isn't one of high-tech's strongest suits, as Top Cat wanders around his alleyway home looking for his gang. I had more fun with this than Yogi and Friends, but I'd have a lot more fun if I could lick my testicles. Curse these ribs. Some wild swings in opinion give Top Cat 66% overall. Hong Kong Phooey, quicker than the human eye. In the game though, he sort of just slowly ambles about, although he does have a very pleasant little slappy footstep noise. Ah, listen to his little pads. The vigilante police janitor Pooch was a fixture on children's television for much of my youth. And here he is in a martial arts high-kicking traipse around a warehouse. Now, is it just me, or do the enemies look like they're from a completely different game? Their design is so jarring when compared to Dog Chops here. I don't know. The game is alright, I guess, and it got a 67% overall. Fair enough.
Here comes Yogi!
Yogi's Great Escape. Yogi Bear, the world's foremost tie-wearing ursine, is on the hunt for picnic baskets, and he's on a trip to New York to rescue his pals from a zoo. A side-scroller against a tight time limit, Yogi is a tough but an okay platformer for the £3 asking price. Sinclair user really liked it. Crash thought it was okay, and your Sinclair thought it stank worse than a mauled park ranger. So Yogi gets 69% overall. Quick Draw McGraw. Look at him. If Quick Draw McGraw is a cowboy horse, does that mean he rides people? The equine Quick Draw finds himself in a proto-Sunset Riders as he takes down outlaws and Injuns, Native American warriors, with his 6-gun shooter. One for fans of people that like inferior versions of Green Beret, but with a horse in them that's sort of anthropomorphic. Yeah, there's a lot of those fans around. Only Crash reviewed it from the look of it, so we'll have to trust them and their blooming 70%, won't we? The Jetsons gave us a glimpse into a future that carried on being exactly like the early 60s, but with terrifying robot maids and flying cars. It was another multi-level flip-screen maze game, but probably the best one, as George and family try and complete menial tasks, proving that life will always be menial tasks and awful. Another big swing in opinion sees the Jetsons level out at 70%. Atom! He's a superhero ant, just like Paul Rudd, only this one, he's actually an ant. He's an actual ant, but in clothes. How bizarre. Atom plays a lot like Bombjack, but with the caped insect defusing bombs in a tight time limit. You must collect bombs in one at a time and throw them into Atom's atomizer. It's alright, this perfectly playable and a bit different from your standard platform fare, as you have to plan the best order in which to collect the bombs. It's a perfectly acceptable game, and the mags agree, giving it an average score of 72%. Rough and Ready in the space adventure. This cat and dog combo aren't particularly well known now, but I sort of remember them being on at some ungodly hour on TV AM or something. So it was either this or an Ann Diamond license game. I don't know if that will work. Oh, there could be a Roland Rat game, and yes, they did make that. It was Ocean who put it out, actually. Anyway, Rough and Ready are on an alien planet and are once again here on a rescue mission for other characters. Because why write clever stories for a sub £5 platform game about some obscure old cartoon that will appeal to children? This game is middle of the road platforming, but I like that main character sprite, very well drawn. Rough and Ready gets a 73% overall score. Johnny Quest. Okay, get all the condom jokes out now. Go on. This game is about a small boy. Yes, you're laughing about sexualizing kids, you monster. Who must rescue... Yep, rescue again. His father from Dr. Zinn, who plans on using Papa's badass science to make a laser. A big one. I actually quite like this game. The animation is nice and the gameplay is above average for a flip screen action platformer on a budget. Johnny was well received by the game's press and he garnered a 77% overall score. Well done, Johnny! Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo at number 2. Oh God, not this smug little shit. And ignore that top billing for the big Great Dane as we have to rescue, yes again really, him and Shaggy as Scrappy Dappy Doo, the pint-sized Larry bastard. He punches his way through the denizens of the castle with steely determination, and despite all the odds being against him, Scrappy-Doo actually succeeds in grabbing the second place slot with an overall score of 79%. Well played, little dog. Now bugger off, everybody hates you. Potsworth and Company was known in America as Midnight Patrol, but it was renamed here because the BBC were worried that children being up after midnight just sounded a bit unacceptable. Potsworth and Company was a one-series 1990 Hanna-Barbera cartoon about a sarcastic Springer Spaniel and his gang of dream-protecting children. The game is actually a very, very good puzzle platformer with fantastic animation. It's very enjoyable stuff, and is by some way the best game on the list. If you want to see more of Potsworth and Company, check out Buzzer H's video on it here. It's a well-deserved 87% average score, and it's got top spot, despite being probably the most forgettable character on the list. Well done, Potsworth. Who are you again? And that brings it to a close. High Tech released a lot of games in a short period between 1989 to 1992, and then they were gone. Another example of an 80s British software house peaking very quickly and then disappearing. David A. Palmer Productions would continue to make games well into the 2000s. Further Hanna-Barbera games would continue, of course, to come out through various software houses on later formats. And Yogi Bear now works as a sandwich artist in the Nuneaton subway. And that's a wrap from Yogi, I guess. Mute, writer, fantasist, warplane enthusiast, and incompetent doghouse user, Snoopy. Yes! The Peanuts show-stealing pooch of Charlie Brown was first penned by cartoonist Charles Schulz in 1950 and has gone on to become one of the most recognisable and iconic comic dogs in the world. However, it wasn't until 1956 that Snoopy finally found his anthropomorphic side and started walking around on his back legs. Though Snoopy and the other Peanuts characters have their roots in the newspaper strip that ran for 50 years, Snoopy was involved in a vast number of TV specials throughout the last 5 decades and a CG animated movie in 2015, not to mention a ton of TV series, including a new one based on the original strips in 2016. The Edge Software house based in California acquired the game rights for the Beagle in 1989 and have proceeded to just release this and 8 other games since then. 2 of them are the other 2 games in this list. Mainly the Edge Software house now just exists to get very litigious about other software houses using the word Edge. Both Electronic Arts and Namco have felt their corporate sting in recent times. Please don't sue me, but what a bunch of shysters. Also released for the Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, the DOS system, the Atari ST, and the CDTV? Really? Snoopy the Cool computer game was a side-scrolling flip-screen adventure. Snoopy is tasked with finding the lost blanket of neurotic lad Linus. He does this not by asking him where he saw it last, because he's a mute dog, that would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? But by completing a range of object-related puzzles and by having little interactions with the rest of the Peanuts cast. It's pretty logical in its puzzle execution, with a little knowledge of the Peanuts lore going a long way, but not necessarily required. Knowing things about Charlie Brown's constantly lost to a single tree kites is a good advantage to have, but as I say, not required. As far as early graphical adventures go, it's pretty darn good. The decision to go full monochrome black and white was a great decision too. Not only does it look clean with zero attribute clash, it ably apes the original strip. In terms of both a technical and an artistic choice, it's perfect. The animation is also top tier, though there isn't a lot of it. Only really is Snoopy the only character that gets fully animated. Charlie Brown here will only move when Snoopy is off screen. Here he is delivering a letter. and he'll only move if no one is looking at him. A bit like a bald, luckless child version of the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. It's a good game for sure, with your Sinclair awarding the title a nice 88% in 1989, though your Sinclair was alone in this, as Sinclair user weren't a fan of the game's admittedly short length, giving the game there a lowly 55%. Poor Snoopy, I'm with your Sinclair on this. I think it's lovely. Finally, we have some feline representation in the Lazy Fat House Pet stakes with Garfield and his 2 games released by those crazy litigious guys at the Edge again. The first of which, Garfield the Big Fat Hairy Deal, was acquired from Softtech International in a buyout by the Edge. In terms of its origins, Garfield is very much the cat version of Snoopy, an iconic design launched in 1978 in a comic strip created by Jim Davis that went on to spawn numerous TV specials, an atrocious CGI film franchise, a regular cartoon show, and a merchandise empire that earns upwards of $750 million a year. Not bad for a lazy, coffee-swilling, lasagna-gorging, cantankerous Ginger Tom, eh? Garfield, along with his geeky owner John and his bullied canine housemate Odie, are characters defined by their personalities, and Garfield's dry put-downs and laissez-faire attitude to life and dieting are still as entertaining now as they were 40 years ago. Garfield as a character is certainly better than that low-rent 80s Heathcliff rip-off anyway. Heathcliff, no one should ever watch your show, you twat. The 2 Garfield games are very different from each other. The first, Garfield Big Fat Hairy Deal, released in 1987, is similar to Snoopy in many respects. Garfield is charged with picking up and moving various objects in order to solve various logic puzzles, and it's part of his mission to rescue his girlfriend Arlene from the local cat pound. While this sounds very energetic for the morbidly obese lazy puss, Softtech actually factored in his constant need for food and rest with a bar that slowly depletes as you move about. You can replenish this by, for instance, stealing John's breakfast, or avoiding Odie's over-enthusiastic bounding by sitting on a high table or a stool. The artwork again is excellent, and while not as clean and crisp as Snoopy, it has character of its own. Garfield's facial expression changes as he gets more and more exhausted, which is a lovely touch for an early Spectrum game. The game is tougher than Snoopy due to the damage meted out to Garfield by various enemies such as Odie and the rats in the basement. Crash liked it, giving it a 90% rating, and your Sinclair awarded it a 7 out of 10. The game looks the part, absolutely it does, and it plays pretty well too, if not particularly spectacular, so I think your Sinclair have it near enough spot on with their 7 out of 10. Garfield Winter's Tale is a different kettle of kippers altogether. It's set in a lasagna-fueled fever dream, as the silly old puss has decided to have a kip outside the open fridge door in John's kitchen. This is affecting his sleeping state, and Garfield is now dreaming of the Swiss Alps and of the factory where chickens lay chocolate eggs. This makes sense to me. This is why we see chocolate eggs in Sainsbury's the day after Boxing Day. It's because the chickens can only lay them in cold weather, such as the height of winter, which is after Boxing Day. We have had an epiphany here, children. A definite epiphany indeed. As I'm sure, like me, you just thought it was cynical capitalism. Well, we were wrong. Garfield's Dream is made up of 3 mini-games. The first is a ski race against arch-antagonist Odie to get to the factory in question. Garfield finds all this activity very exhausting and must top up his energy via a series of plates of lasagna on the way down the course that are handed out by an army of infinite Johns. Odie will try and snaffle them too, so be swift. Avoid the many hazards, and we're back in conventional action-adventure territory, with Garfield exploring the huge factory, ensuring that the chickens are pumped full of chocolate so they can produce their chocolate eggs. Christ! That's a bit cruel, isn't it? It's a bit foie gras. foie gras, whatever. It's that style of liver abuse on chickens that I don't like here. And in a way, Odie is the hero. He's an animal rights activist who attempts to thwart Garfield's rather deplorable, ambitious project here. You can kick him up the arse to get rid of him, of course. Ooh yeah, Odie, take that, you hippie. Finally, Garfield has to pursue an escaped chicken on a vast frozen lake by skating after its footprints. Garfield A Winter's Tale is easily the weakest game so far on this list. It looks pretty nice still, the graphics are very good representations of the Garfield characters, but none of the games are that good to play. All of the mini games to a game are deathly slow. They're very slow to play, very laboured. Both Crash and Your Sinclair were not amused with Garfield A Winter's Tale, and both awarded it a lowly 50%. Inspector Gadget, eh? Never before has such a large amount of money been wasted on turning a completely incompetent policeman into a crime-fighting cyborg. Largely because no one has ever spent any money on turning a completely incompetent policeman into a crime-fighting cyborg. Not in real life anyway. You might count the RoboCop remake if you're being particularly harsh. But I am digressing. Inspector Gadget is utterly useless though. His 9-year-old niece and a Labrador do all of his detective work. How did he manage to score this sweet deal to have like a helicopter in his head? I want a helicopter in my head. It would make the commute to work much easier and everyone would think I was really cool. No one would ever think that. Anyway, Inspector Gadget. Dick Entertainment, a company whose name always elicited at least a mild smirk to my youthful self whenever an all-round pigtailed smartass Penny and the family dog Brain, who takes a lot of abuse from both Gadget and Mad's forces. And as such, there is the premise of every Inspector Gadget episode ever made. And lo, it was a repeated formula from its pilot episode in 1982 to its final episode in 1986. And then that formula was brought back in multiple remakes, spin-offs, and really crap films. Now, a few facts here before we get into the game. The pilot of Inspector Gadget featured the inspector with a very fulsome moustache, as you can see here. The reason this was removed was because MGM got the legal hump with Dick for near plagiarising the look of Inspector Clouseau from Pink Panther. And in fairness, there is more than a passing resemblance to Clouseau in the look, the personality and the general haplessness of Inspector Gadget. Another big inspiration for Gadget was Maxwell Smart from American Bond spoof's TV series Get Smart, a similarly gadget-laden imbecile who just so happens to share the same voice with Gadget, that being actor Don Adams. One thing that I thought was an influence as a child, but wasn't due to Inspector Gadget being made 5 years before it, is RoboCop. However, having seen RoboCop recently, it made me think, how on earth did poor old Inspector Gadget end up getting so mortally wounded? Was it similar to Murphy in RoboCop, who obviously encounters a violent gun gang who blow off his hand and give him fatal injuries, and then he's encased in like a metal iron lung where he can't move, but he has like gadgets hidden on him, like that spike that he puts through Clarence's face? No, he doesn't encounter any gangs that blow him apart. He slipped on a banana skin. Now, how badly do you have to slip on a banana skin to have all your limbs and insides replaced with like gadgets and other mechanical apparatus? That was some slip. But really, what a dickhead. Inspector Gadget and the Circus of Fear was published by Melbourne House in 1987. It was released on all the major 8-bit computer formats of the time. The Spectrum game sees Detective Dimlow here sent to investigate a series of strange disappearances at a recently arrived international circus. You are obviously Inspector Gadget in this game, though I do think there is scope for a really good 2-player co-op game on the modern consoles, where you play as Penny and Brain, and you have to steer Gadget to the end of the level in one piece. You can make it a cross between Krusty Super Funhouse, that would be the Brain part of it, and Lemmings, where you as Penny would operate Inspector Gadget's gadgets for him. That's a good idea, right? There's a reason that 1 minute into talking about the game, I'm already talking about a hypothetically better game than this one, because this one is a bit of a clunker. It doesn't even have the decency to be EastEnders bad either. So you, as Gadget, have to traverse from left to right. Anymore, but they actually provide different routes through the landscape, with the aim of each level to find a slab, maybe a trapdoor of some sort, I don't know, it's not clear, to progress to the next level. Gadget is aided in his quest by numerous power-ups that are actually Inspector Gadget's gadgets. Quite why they're not stored in Gadget's hat or his Mac, as usual, is not explained. And yet, here they are, all left on the pavement. They give you various abilities as seen in the TV show, so you can scoot around on his little shoe skates, you can hop around on springs and fly about with his helicopter hat. They have negligible advantages, in all honesty, and are just part of a rather flimsy all-round production, which is Inspector Gadget and the Circus of Fear. You see, the sound is restricted to a series of blips and blops, the graphics are tawdry, and although the main sprite of Inspector Gadget is easily recognisable, there's none of the familiar mad agents or any of the other major characters from the show for most of the game. The gameplay itself is a slowed down Shockwave rider with very slow and stodgy response times on the controls. All in all, it is a poor effort, a sentiment shared not only by me but also by the sole UK magazine reviewer of the time, Sinclair User, whose journo, Graham Taylor, not that one, pointed out that the largely poor graphics combined with uninspiring gameplay to make this one of Melbourne's worst in a while. Graham then duly gave the game a 2 out of 5, and my respect, as he's completely right. Wowzers, Penny! Go, go, Gadget, dustbin! Cats are wonderful house pets. They're like dogs, except they walk themselves and they fit in backpacks. Now, I must admit there are dogs that fit in backpacks too, but almost unanimously, unless the cat is overweight, they'll fit in your backpack. They can be swines though. They can bring in dubious gifts, a distended sparrow, a half-chewed mole, the odd dismembered vicar, and of course mice. Lots of mice. It is this everyday rodent struggle that forms the basis of Tom and Jerry, one of the world's most beloved cartoons. It was William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, that pairing that gave us so many classic characters from Yogi Bear to Scooby-Doo to Top Cat, that first gave us the antagonist pairing of House Cat Tom and Mouse Jerry. I've done a review of some of those previous animated shows in another video which you can look up there. It was as far back as 1940 that the original shorts were produced, winning Academy Awards during the initial run between 1940 and 1958, tying with Walt Disney's Silly Symphonies with 7 gongs apiece for short movies of an animated nature. A huge hit for MGM until the cartoon studio closed for a short period of time, causing Hanna-Barbera to leave and go and make all those other series with animated talking animals that I've already discussed, as well as stuff like the Jetsons and the Flintstones. Tom and Jerry has continued in various forms since, all the way to 2014, with episodes being repeated many times on Western television channels and becoming a staple of many a generational childhood. It's a simple tale of slapstick conflict, with the two mute leads finding inventive ways in which to hurt each other. Okay, mainly Tom. The series has amassed 164 episodes, and really, who doesn't like Tom and Jerry? I don't know, I suppose the Nazis, slow chimps, maybe. There's not many other people that don't. If you don't like Tom and Jerry, you're one of those two things, a Nazi or a slow chimp or both. It was developer Magic Bytes from Germany that were the first to secure the game rights for Tom and Jerry from MGM in 1989, no doubt slapping away the grasping mitts of the likelier high-tech alternative or Ocean with a wooden ruler. In the later part of the year, Magic Bytes, who developed the game in-house, released Tom and Jerry 2 for the Amiga, the Atari ST, the Amstrad CPC, the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum. But what about Tom and Jerry 1? Well, there isn't one. At least, not for the Spectrum. The only evidence of a Spectrum game that exists called just Tom and Jerry is the Spanish re-release of the game by Herb Software a couple of years later. So, Tom and Jerry 2 came out before Tom and Jerry 1. This is a crime against chronology. So what gives? Well, Tom and Jerry 1, the proper one, does exist, just not on Sir Clive's machine. Tom and Jerry Hunting High and Low is Tom and Jerry 1, it's by Magic Bytes, and it was released in the US and in Europe on the Amiga, the Atari ST and the Commodore 64. Here is the game running on the Atari ST. Now, it looks kind of similar to the Spectrum one, doesn't it? Other than the graphics enjoying that 16-bit beef up, there's clearly a striking similarity between the Atari ST version of Tom and Jerry 1 and Tom and Jerry 2 on the Spectrum, to the point of being near identical. Other than the little mix-up between the words lose and loose, of course. In fact, the game was re-released later on in the year, the crafty Magic Byte swine Huns making a few minor tweaks to the environment and the graphics, and just called the game Tom and Jerry 2, which is when the Amstrad MSX and Spectrum games called Tom and Jerry 2 came out. So Tom and Jerry 1 came out on the Spectrum after 2, but 1 came out on the other formats first. But it doesn't matter, because Spectrum Tom and Jerry 1 is the same game as Tom and Jerry 2, which is the same game as Tom and Jerry 1 that came out before either of them, and they're all the same anyway. Clear? No, me neither. So how is the game? In a word, ropey. Remember, 1989 is well into the latter half of the Spectrum's lifespan at this point, and Tom and Jerry 2 looks like this. It only has a 48K mode, and it's a buggy, colour clashing uggo of a port. You are Jerry, and you must evade the tabby terror Tom as you scour the homestead for lumps of gouda that the owners have left up on high shelves, appliances and tables for some reason that escapes all conceivable logic known to man. Jerry leaps with the agile heft of an excitable flea as he traverses the furniture-laden rooms on his hunt for fromage. Unusually for a Spectrum platformer, you can steer him mid-jump, which is absolutely necessary in the close confines of some of the high-rise ottomans and presentation shelves. Despite this, it is still a pig to get the little fella to manoeuvre his way around. It does lend the game a weird proto-survival horror aspect as you wrestle your way around a low table as Tom approaches, though instead of yelling in suspenseful fear, you'll be calling out the greatest hits of your favourite cuss words and swears at the coffee table that blocks your way. If Tom catches you, he sort of leaps like a shark, maw open straight at the ground, which looks painful to me for both cat and mouse. But rather than have it end your life, you are inconvenienced by 30 in-game minutes. There's a time limit, you see, though I'm not exactly sure what the storyline reason is for a time limit. It's just collecting cheese. If you do know, tell me in the comments or make something up, and I'll gullibly believe you, probably, because it's probably better than whatever story they've come up for it. To move around the house, you can run through mice holes, where you get this rather Caesar summoning tunnel sequence. Here, much like the rest of the game, you have to collect cheese chunks while avoiding mousetraps and explosives that Tom has deemed suitable to stuff in the skirting boards of the family abode. I'm not sure how many cheese segments you need to get to complete the game, as there's no on-screen indicator, and the chunks regenerate anyway if you re-enter a room via a mouse tunnel. I can't tell you if the game even has an end. The game is unquestionably a complete mess. Due to the low distribution of the game, there doesn't appear to be a lot of information about it anywhere, or at least the Spectrum port of it, though the low scores of the original release on the Commodore and Atari formats seem to indicate that the game wasn't really a critical success on any level. And it goes without doubt that that quality is mirrored in the Spectrum version. Maybe it's even worse. I don't think that either your Sinclair user or Crash would have gone any easier on it than some of these Commodore or Atari magazines. Magic Bytes would also go on to make a game based on the Pink Panther, releasing 32 games in total over its existence, mainly on the 16-bit computers and PC, until they closed doors in 2000.
They did, however, relaunch in 2017 via original founder Thomas Meyer Torberins. Christ, I hope I got that right. Deciding that he wanted to reuse the name for his new VR venture. Hopefully for him, his work in the VR realm will prove to be a lot more successful than his efforts at MGM slapstick cartoons. When I was about 6, I saw a decidedly non-Warner Brothers approved Roadrunner t-shirt at a local market. Featured upon it were the pair of Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, and regrettably Wile E. had finally succeeded and caught his quarry. Rather than consume the blue bird, though, Wile E. Coyote seemed to have more rather amorous intentions towards his avian adversary. Along with the bestial sexual assault, the slogan "Beep beep now, you bastard" was featured. Now, the two games I'm about to talk about have very little to do with this introduction, apart from the fact that they feature both Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. But I thought it was an interesting anecdote to start off this particular episode with. Anyway, Roadrunner and Roadrunner plus Wile E. Coyote were two Spectrum games, and before we get to them, let's find out a bit more about the origin story of these two speedy beasts. Yes. Featured in the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies series of animations, Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote have a very simple conceit. Wile E. Coyote is a cunning, sinister and very hungry predator who uses a variety of tricks, plots and ludicrous contraptions in many unsuccessful attempt to stuff the fleet of foot Roadrunner down his canine gullet. It usually ends up with him getting unspeakably injured in a slapstick manner, akin to Tom in Tom and Jerry, which is where much of the mirth was sourced. He usually acquired the contraptions from Acme, a sort of Wish.com of emu murder related items, and the intended consequences were generally reversed upon the foolish dog. Endlessly entertaining and a constant since its introduction in 1952, the wordless animal upon animal violence is an enduring and timeless cartoon that has been enjoyed by many a generation since its inception. Created by the legendary Chuck Jones as a parodic tribute to Tom and Jerry, it ended up becoming popular in its own right. The two games, they were released by two different software houses a couple of years apart. The first one, Roadrunner, was based on a 1985 Atari coin-op. I've never played that coin-op. It looks quite good. Here's some footage of it here. The 8-bit conversion of it, which was produced for the Commodore 64, Amstrad and ZX Spectrum in 1987, was produced by those lovely chaps at US Gold. And well, the game starts off pretty damn well. The music is pretty good, with a selection of classical music burped out by the Spectrum sound chip as best it can. As for the graphics, they are small but accurate monochrome sprites on the well-coloured backdrops that represent Western American deserts. As a Roadrunner, you must dart along the road, collecting every patch of birdseed that has been left there, probably by that wiliest of coyotes, while you also have to avoid not only his grasp, the hungry little carnivore swine, but also a series of rumbling trucks, some perilous pitfalls and some great rolling boulders. Wile E. will attempt to clutch the neck of the feathered speedster using a variety of gadgets seen in the show, including the famous rocket skates. The 5 lives Mr. R. Runner has at his disposal are all you get, and these lives must be fueled by gathering all the seeds along the level, else he will faint like a model at a Bill Cosby house party, making him easy pickings for the prairie predator. The screen will helpfully remind you if you missed any tuck by flashing a warning message on the screen, but beware, as some piles also contain iron filings. Once you've thrown these down the rapid runner's laughing trap, he will become very susceptible to the coyote's Acme giant magnet. As I've stated, the overall presentation is very good, from the border around the main game screen to the title screen itself to the music. Well, they're all of excellent quality, and the gameplay is of a nice standard. It's an intriguing play, and it's a nice little conversion of Atari's machine. The tiny graphics are small, simple, but effective in portraying the cartoon duo, and the cartoon to life aesthetic is there a little bit, but the game suffers from one crippling flaw. It is very particular when it comes to its birdseed placement and that of Roadrunner picking it up, and you will find that you will likely flail into the path of an oncoming truck or into the hungry gizzard of your primary antagonist as you try and nosh down that birdseed. It really can be a swine to line up bird with grub, and leads to some very frustrating moments, I can tell you. So a silly oversight in an otherwise well-baked conversion then. Crash awarded the game a 73% and put forward that, despite some letdown on the graphics, it is still a playable and addictive game. Sinclair user are also not a fan of the sprite work, stating that it captures the original cartoon quite well, but is let down by its small graphics. They decided it was a 7 out of 10. Your Sinclair matched the other two Spectrum publications with yet another 7 out of 10 score, saying it was a true enough conversion of the popular arcade game, and it has lots to recommend it. So all in all, they were in agreement with me. It's pretty good, but it's no stunner. Our old friends at High-Tech diverted their attention away from their usual cartoon stable of Hanna-Barbera, as seen in the video, one of my favourite videos I've done, to rival studios Warner Brothers for the second and final Roadrunner game on the Sinclair, that being Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Released in 1991 for the slightly more expensive than normal budget price of £3.99, Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote features the titular pair in more breakneck cat-and-mouse digital shenanigans. Over 8 levels, you'll try to escape the clutches of your hairy tormentor in 2 types of stages. In the first, you'll manoeuvre Roadrunner slowly along a single screen, whilst dodging aerial and ground assaults from both the coyote and also a range of other animals too. Your aim here is to pick up little birdseed piles that are reminiscent of a well-curled dog shit. These levels are fairly simple Game & Watch style efforts. They're very easy to pick up and understand, but fiendishly difficult by the game's end. The second level type is more fast-paced, with you steering your bird past obstacles at high speed with the unneutered fur-covered menace in hot pursuit. The seed munching of the first level now comes heavily into play. Now, whilst you can still eat seeds in this level, the previous level's seed total adds to your energy levels here, and where you were eating the ejaculate of a sunflower in that previous level, well, that may be required for you to outpace the galoot behind you who's hungry for your flesh. If you haven't eaten enough, well, It is beep beep now you bastard time. If you do manage to stay ahead of him, you'll get an absolutely lovely monochrome recreation of a cutscene from the cartoon show, usually of him falling to his death. From here, you'll get the same pair of levels repeated for another 3 times, albeit with a different backdrop and a steeper difficulty curve. The representations of the feuding pair are wonderfully rendered here, but the fly in the ointment comes from the graphics. The monochrome characters are overlaid on the backgrounds, making it really hard to differentiate peril from power-up and background from beast. This, combined with the lack of variety, make the Looney Tunes warfaring pair's second adventure a missed opportunity. Your Sinclair gave Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner a 68% in their February 1992 issue, saying it was a samey and disappointing collect 'em up with extremely obscure graphics. Crash state that while graphically great, they wanted more variety from the game, and that's why Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner gets just a 64% from them. In my opinion, the first game was slightly the better one. It's a shame that the games aren't slightly better, as the cartoon on which they are based are universally loved. Still, they're not the most disappointing thing that came out of Rolf's Cartoon Club. Are they, Rolf? Yes. Yabba dabba do, or yabba dabba don't. Yes, today we're covering the 2 games of the Flintstones, a cave family who have forced all the local animals into slavery as their appliances, the complete Stone Age bastards. Still, it's a good thing for Fred that Wilma didn't work out that putting a hummingbird into a snake would consign him to the stone sofa forevermore. Bzzz. Debuting on September 30th, 1960 on ABC, the Flintstones charts the tale of a very historically shaky Stone Age family and their neighbours and close friends, the Rubbles, who inhabit the town of Bedrock. A Hanna-Barbera production that ran for just 6 years? 6 years? Right, is that all? The show is presented as a 1960s suburban Americana sitcom, but with all the technologies and trappings of that particular age replaced by animals and dinosaurs being cruelly misused in a series of degrading ways. Mammoths are used as showers, birds as record needles, and brontosauri, are utilised as construction equipment. Yes, when it comes to historical accuracy, no show or movie has ever given less of a flying pterodactyl about the past. Fred was the grumpy, corpulent breadwinner of the household, quick to rage and a selfish chump of the highest order, with wayfish 10 out of 10 Wilma, his more intelligent but spend-happy, long-suffering other half. He must have been packing a Stegosaurus leg bone in his saber-toothed cat-furred underpants to win the heart of that fair maiden. Barney Rubble lives next door. A rather simple, short gentleman is Barney. Usually he ends up being the target of Fred's ire, and he lives with Betty, who, much like Wilma, is happy to spend the household funds on tattered, expensive fur dresses, and is prone to bouts of jealousy, along with the matriarch of the Flintstone homestead. Basically, all the main characters of the Flintstones are terrible people. Children followed in the shape of violent dickbag Bam Bam and Pebbles, who would inevitably get together in a follow-up series, though I'm quick to point out not as babies, because that would be absolutely not okay, but instead as teenagers. A live-action film would appear in 1994, starring John Goodman and Rick Moranis, and it did pretty well at the box office because early 90s cinema and dinosaurs were definitely a thing that got together and produced money. A prequel, completely recast and dreadful, plopped out of a raptor's egg sac and hit the rock of failure in 2000, never to be thought of again. Please don't watch it, you might as well just punch yourself in the face. The first Spectrum game to cover the exploits of the Flintstones was Quicksilver's Yabba Dabba Doo. Quicksilver were behind the previously covered TV trio of Max Headroom, the Snowman, and Rupert and the Toy Maker's Party, along with the Thompson Twins adventure. Yabba Dabba Doo's cassette inlay gets straight to the point. Fred wants to dip his T-bone in Wilma's tar pit, and she's not going to let him until he's built a bit of shelter to commit the dino with two backs under. Yes, we're right at the dawn of bedrock here, and he will need to build a house in bedrock if he wants to make his own bedrock. You do this by finding boulders around the steadily growing township with which to sculpt his stone villa. Numerous rolling stones, no, not Mick Jagger though, I guess the age would check out, eh? And prehistoric creatures seek to disrupt Fred from fortifying his erection, making him stumble and fall on his rotund rump. Fred, and while this seems canny from a laziness point of view, has set up his house next door to a tip. I reckon that Wilma may well be displeased about his positioning here, but in terms of the game, it's perfectly placed. Low-flying, cock-blocking shitehawks constantly drop small stones on the Flintstone lot, which isn't fantastic for the level foundations, and this forces Frederick to punt the pebbles into the nearby ditch before he can finish constructing his gaff. Fred can recharge his running stamina by meeting up with Wilma, which is a different bar from his general health, and if that goes down to nothing, a life is lost. Once he's built his abode, Fred can find his loved one in town and, well, he can put a pebbles in her nearby ditch, if you see what I mean. And yes, his nonsensical car is in the game somewhere, which helps you apparently, but I didn't find it. I like Yabba Dabba Doo, it's pretty good. Graphics may lack colour, but they're recognisable and reasonably animated. It's pretty addictive to play, but there are some pretty big triceratops in the path of greatness. It does involve some rather repetitive procedures, you know, finding stones, putting the stones in your lot to build the house, getting rid of the little pebbles. And the weird way of moving around the map is utterly disorientating. The screen you're taken to is dictated by whether you exit left or right at the top or the bottom of the screen. There's no obvious line to differentiate where you'll end up, and I think with a bit longer in the Stone Age Arga, Quicksilver would have come up with a much better, and let's be honest, pretty obvious solution to this nonsense that is the game's navigation. It really is mind-blowingly dumb how this game moves you about Bedrock. Issue 26 of Crash magazine gave Yabba Dabba Doo an 81%, commenting that it is a good game and it's great for Flintstones fans. Your Sinclair said that if you're a Flintstone fanatic, it is an essential purchase. If not, then check out the reruns on the telly and then buy it. They gave the game an 8 out of 10 in issue 4 of their fine publication. Sinclair users were less enthused with the modern Stone Age Families game in their 49th issue. They gave Yabba Dabba Doo a 2 out of 5 and thought that it's remarkable that Quicksilver think they can get away with charging £7.99 for it. A game it would be hard to convince me to part with any money for
is The Flintstones, a 1988 release by Grand Slam Entertainments. Grand Slam Entertainments also did St. Greavesy, along with a few TV games I've yet to cover, but no doubt will. Oh yes, unless I die or something. The Flintstones was released for $8.95, so it was even more than Yabba Dabba Doo, but at least we Spectrum owners paid less than those poor souls who got hold of the Master System port. Yeesh. It's a game so boring it's like watching paint dry. No, it is literally watching paint dry. Fred wants to go bowling, you see, but Wilma is not having that until the tubby troglodyte paints the living room. Amazing! If this isn't the worst opening level concept for a computer game ever, I'd like to know what is. As well as his unruly sentient paintbrush giving him all kinds of jip, Fred also has to nursemaid his sprawling daughter, as Pebbles constantly escapes the confines of her cot to Banksy the freshly emulsioned dwelling. Complete this most frustrating yet menial of tasks and Mr. Flintstone and Barney hit the road to the bowling alley. The roads of primitive man appear to be atrocious, which is sort of to be expected given that there's some millennia from being invented. Fred must jump and remember it is him doing the leaping rocks that litter the roads in front of him. If he fails, then a wheel will be dislodged, which Barney and Fred must fix before continuing on their way. Or, just stop doing that and walk, because you're already sort of walking anyway, you idiots. The bowl-off sees the game inject some nice animation reminiscent of the cartoon, as the prehistoric pair pirouette their best moves on the bowling alley floor. This bit is no Wii bowling, however. It's very difficult to work out what's going on, and if you're actually making any difference to the play. The final sequence involves Pebbles getting in all kinds of peril at a building site, and Fred sets out to rescue his Triassic toddler before she comes a cropper. Pebbles doesn't actually die if you fail. Instead, your Game Over message tells you that Barney rescued her instead. And to be fair, that's a pretty good way to avoid a tragic accidental child's death in a Hanna-Barbera cartoon license. Especially as Barney saving Pebbles would be a good setup to Fred feeling an emasculated piece of crap for an episode, and works very well within the Flintstones universe, if we need it to. The Flintstones is graphically quite impressive, probably more so than Yabba Dabba Doo. The little animation nods are on point, and in fairness, the events of the Flintstones would be more likely to happen in the show than those of the game Yabba Dabba Doo, unless I missed the episode where Wilma demanded lodgings if Fred wanted to plough her ginger underfurrow. It's just that the stages and their execution are poorly thought out and delivered appallingly well in the Flintstones game. The Flintstones garnered a 62% in Crash issue number 54, with them stating that the game doesn't quite manage to pull off the character or the humour of the cartoons. Sinclair User gave it a bit of a lofty 8 out of 10 in their issue 74. They reckoned it had good graphics and a variety of game styles with an immense difficulty that made it last. Your Sinclair called it a good conversion of the TV characters, let down by trying to put too many other bits in too. They gave it 6 out of 10 in their issue 32. Well, this game was so difficult, I needed a Flintstone advertised cigar after playing it to calm me down, followed by a Flintstones backed beer. Ugh.
Armstrongs to the finish. That's not finish, but finish. Finish. 'Cause I eats me spinach. It's a unique turn of phrase, no matter how you look at it. Popeye is, you see, not an educated seafaring gentleman, but you know what? He did pretty well for himself. Have you got 3 different ZX Spectrum games about you? No. Well, it wasn't worth getting that degree then, was it? Popeye, created as a comic strip in 1929 by E.C. Sager for his Thimble Theatre strip, was a truly enduring star. His cast of characters are truly grotesque in their look, with the sort of violent love triangle between Popeye Olive Oil and Bluto that you might get in a Midlands flat roof pub on a Friday night, as easily as you would in the oceanic harbour town that Popeye resides in. In 1933, Max Fleischer adapted them for a series of movie theatre shorts for Paramount that continued well into the 1950s and later were distributed by Warner Brothers. These remained incredibly popular and were followed by numerous comic books, a Robin Williams movie, a ton of video games including a classic NES and arcade effort from Nintendo, and a string of different television shows, the two of which I remember the most being the all-new Popeye Hour from 1978 until 1981 and Popeye and Son, where Popeye had Olive Oil on lockdown with a ring on her finger and a pre-teen kid creatively called Popeye Jr. And if you're wondering why Bluto is called Brutus where in those cartoons when you were growing up, well, apparently it was a rights thing. Apparently Warner Brothers thought that Paramount owned the rights to the name Bluto. They didn't, and they'd just been using that name all along when they didn't need to. You'd think they'd know. Anyway, that's that. While there were 3 Popeye games officially released by DK-Tronics and Alternative Software on the ZX Spectrum, it's worth noting the attempts to bring the classic Nintendo arcade to the Sinclair machine, both after its commercial lifespan and during the time it was eating spinach and punching the old Commodore Bluto in and around its chops. Parker Brothers had one ready to go for the Interface 2 peripheral, which came out on a ROM cartridge. Get your instant load times away from my Spectrum, you console-aping heathen. There's some really good homebrews of Popeye as well. It is worth playing them because, you know, that Nintendo arcade machine was a pretty good game. A shame, really. The first release came courtesy of DK-Tronics in 1985, and our old friend Don Priestley, the man who hated small, monochrome sprites. Don was the magnificent brain behind Benny Hill's Madcap Chase, Minder, and the incredible Trapdoor game, which, if you've been watching since the beginning of this channel, was way back in episode 1. In a way, Popeye takes some inspiration from the arcade game in the form of its central conceit. Popeye must collect hearts and give them to the awkward collection of intertwined Q-tips, that is, his girlfriend Olive Oil, in order to win her love, whilst jealous bearded obese ape Bluto attempts to cockblock with physical violence. Popeye wanders the streets of his seaside town, picking up the hearts that are pinned up on windows, balconies and lighthouses, and he must return them to Olive's house, all the time accosted by not only Bluto, but by a menagerie of hostile beasties and sea hags. Contact with one of them will put the aesthetically challenged sailor on his rump, but he can be easily revived with a tin of spinach, which can be found all around the nooks and crannies in his neighbourhood. If Popeye doesn't have one, then sorry mate, you won't be taking the skim boat to Tuna Town in the port of Miss Olive Oil. Popeye can avoid molestation by ducking in and out of the screen, where an enclave of some sort is available. You'll need to do this to enter various grooves and doorways in order to locate the ropes, keys and hearts that Popeye needs to make his day complete. Popeye can only carry 8 items at one time, and so it's a game that relies a lot on trial and error in terms of figuring out what you need, when and which screens to go to first. The huge hulking sprite that represents our seafaring hero looks the part, but this is a problem with a lot of Priestley games in the fact that he turns and moves about as quickly as an ocean liner. It's this slow control combined with the huge graphics that slightly hinder the game's enjoyment, as you can find yourself in trouble very easily with not a lot of time or room to react and get out of the way. That said, the graphics really are good for an earlier Spectrum game. It's as colourful as the flank of an ice cream van, and the general presentation is of a high standard. The September 1985 Crash gave it a 90% with the prerequisite Crash Smash. They declared it as a very attractive, cunningly programmed game. Your Spectrum, which is of course Your Sinclair under its previous moniker, informed us that they would spend the green stuff, no, not the spinach, on this game, and they gave it an 8 out of 10. They didn't need to do that. They probably got it for free as a review copy. Sinclair user were also fans of the swollen-wristed Ocean Adventurer, giving it a 4 out of 5 and saying that the graphics are excellent and very large. Well, they're not wrong, are they? What kind of a review is that? 1991's Popeye 2 sees the licence go over to Alternative, who want all the cartoon licences, thank you very much. Interestingly, the DK-Tronics title will go on to find itself packaged together by Alternative Software with both Popeye 2 and Popeye 3 as a collection in late 1992. Popeye 2 was a £2.99 budget release and also an action platformer. You can't go wrong with that, surely. It finds the gurning seaman at odds with Bluto again, who has kidnapped Olive and placed her in a variety of perilous situations. Doesn't Bluto fancy olive oil? I've often found that abducting women usually has that opposite effect on charming them. You can't go around kidnapping them and expecting them to love you. Ignore the Stockholm Syndrome effect, it doesn't work. It's damned baloney, I say. With graphics not quite as colourful and with sprites not quite as big as the previous game, Popeye 2 still manages to have really big sprites and some bright, colourful backgrounds, so well done on being sensible alternative. The cast of characters in Popeye 2 is bolstered by series regulars like Eugene the Jeep, Wimpy, Sweet Pea and Alice the Goon, which really helps bring the cartoon to life in the form of this game. But it also presents some unique challenges. You have to help feed Wimpy's shameful addiction to burgers, and you have to prevent baby Sweet Pea from hurling itself to its death off of girders or ledges. Spinach provides Popeye with extra strength for his fisting when he encounters people like Bluto and Alice the Goon. You must leap from platform to platform, avoiding hazards and defusing bombs, trying to reach the end of the level, in order to rescue your skinny other half before the obese bully snatches her off to another location. It's simple stuff really, controls are responsive, some hazards are annoyingly difficult to avoid, but all in all it's pretty decent fare. Alternative have done worse games, that's for certain, there's one in a minute. So Crash from May 1991 gave Popeye a 60%, stating that the gameplay is very simplistic and for a game aimed at younger players it's a little bit tough. Your Sinclair loved Popeye 2 in their May 1991 edition, a 95%, and their mega game. At a bargain price, you'd have to be stupider than two short planks who just failed their GCSEs to miss it. That's what they said. Sinclair user, also in their May 1991 edition, compared Popeye 2 to a chicken balti. Nice when you really fancy it, but only good enough for the occasional outing. Then they followed it up by throwing out some shade. The type of game you get on the cover of Crash. Not bad, just not great. Hark at thee. Popeye 3. Wrestle Crazy. Wrestling. Cartoons about deformed port workers. The robot from the old TV show Lost in Space. The xenomorph from the hit film Alien. Together at last on your ZX Spectrum. What a curious goulash of absolutely unconnected things all boiled together in a big old pan of confusion. No doubt Popeye 3 was assembled by a managerial focus group, but not in the boardroom but around a table in a pub stacked high with empty pint and shot glasses. What's this thing the kids are watching with the steroidy men? Oh, that's American wrestling. Ooh, get that license. No, Ocean have it. Damn! Okay, let's use our licenses we already have to make a wrestling game. What suits wrestling the most? Count Duckula? Not really, no. Shoe people? Nah. Sooty and Sweep? Are you on drugs, sir? Popeye! He fights? Yeah, okay, fine. I don't think kids will be fooled by it, but you know what? Let's get Bluto in a leotard. No. Let's think about this. I think we'll keep Popeye, but what should we have him fight? What do kids like? They like mutants? They like zombies? Oh, I know. Let's put aliens in the game. That's a good idea. Okay, but why? And so it came to be, at least via this headcanon that I've just come up with, but it's hard to think that it panned out much differently from that. It is pretty bad. Graphics are okay, the crowd is full of interstellar goons, and Popeye's pals are on the outside of the ring too, sometimes offering help, but with Bluto, well, he's never been your friend, has he? So he's throwing explosives into the ring like an absolute arsehole. Luckily for you though, you can lure your alien aggressors into those bombs and make them take damage that way. You can perform about 3 moves, which is not very substantial for a wrestling game, and to perform them you have to wag your joystick like a teen boy on his first night after finding X-Hamster. It plays pretty wretchedly, as you'd suspect. A Daley Thompson's decathlete style control system does not suit a wrestling game in my opinion. So yes, it is pretty poor stuff, and in my opinion certainly the worst of the 3. And no, Popeye doesn't get a chest burster come out of him if he loses to the alien, more's the pity. No Crash review, but the 2 Sinclair magazines stick their roar in, as we knew they would. Incidentally, Alternative did something quite clever with the cover tapes. They had a reviewer from each magazine feature as the opponent for Popeye in the demo, which they allowed both magazines to put on their covers. Very clever marketing. Well done, Alternative. Probably should have put that time into making the game better though. In their issue 83, Your Sinclair gave it a 56%, saying that after Popeye 1 and 2, it's a great disappointment. Christ, they were lucky to get that cover tape, weren't they? Sinclair user gave Wrestle Crazy an 84. Said that super colourful cartoon graphics with an excellent licence gives Popeye 3 a solid lead over its predecessors. Does it though? I don't think it does. And that... In terms of burglars, you'd think that a big cat would be a pretty poor one. Surely it would knock things over with its chubby feline buttocks, or its swinging huge tail, or it would forgo taking that bejewelled chalice or pearl necklace in favour of devouring the house pug. Not only that, but this one is very bright pink in colour. Utterly useless at late night larceny, that colour, isn't it? And so the game will prove this to be. But more on that in a bit. In 1963, the Pink Panther was released in cinemas by United Artists, and it was a comedic farce starring the incredible Peter Sellers. The film follows the hapless Detective Clouseau as he tries to capture the villainous phantom jewel thief before he gets his hands on the Pink Panther, which, rather than being a skinny puce puss, is actually a priceless diamond. That's not to say the famous animated panther doesn't at least appear in it, as surely he does, both in the opening credits and as a victim of the clumsy Clouseau as he drives off to close out the movie. 7 other movies would follow in the original series of Pink Panther movies, along with a pair of Steve Martin remakes which are best
discussed in hushed tones as a way to scare children at Halloween, or as a way to ward them off of misbehaving by using a viewing of Pink Panther 2 as a threat. But by the time any of these subsequent movie sequels had come out, we had already seen the iconic character in his natural habitat, that not of the jungle but of a telly-cartoon, starting with the Pink Fink in 1964. These shorts would be very popular and would be followed by longer episodes in the shape of the Pink Panther show in 1969. This show usually had the blancmange-hued big cat annoying the hell out of a short-tempered character called the Little Man. The Pink Panther would do this effortlessly while being all cool as a cucumber, like it had been in a freezer for ages. Don't bite a frozen cucumber, teeth will be lost. It had that cool theme tune and that car. Who didn't like that car? Well, it looked like crap, that car, but the music went well with it. 62 episodes would be shown before it was followed by the all-new Pink Panther show, the one I would imagine most of the folk watching this channel will remember most fondly. One of the most memorable parts for me was the separate segments that had a blue Jewish New York accented aardvark chasing an ant. Who couldn't like that bit? I'll get that ant! Is that racist? Hopefully not. It was pretty much the same format as the original, and it ran for a long amount of time, eventually ending in 1990. There was also a series that ran in the 1990s, but can we just get to the game already, because even I'm bored at this stage. Pink Panther the game was clearly designed far more on the animated show than the Clouseau movies, and would be published by Gremlin Graphics in 1988 on all the major 8 and 16-bit computers of the time. It was programmed by Magic Bytes, an Anglo-Germanic company also responsible for Tom and Jerry 2, a game that I covered many moons ago, and no, there isn't a Tom and Jerry 1. Watch the video there to find out about that. Gremlin rather wonderfully put the digital adventure of the salmon moose coloured Meower on a fittingly pink cassette inside a similarly coloured cassette inlay. That is an appreciated level of detail. I take my hat off to you, but I'm not wearing a hat. The game finds the Panther having to find work as a butler as he's currently flat broke. But being a character known for his sticky paws, he uses this as a method of acquiring the valuables he will need to get back to his luxury lifestyle on a tropical beach paradise. A great plan. The Mog's plan is to steal from his boss Reese Mogg while he dozes. Regrettably though, the owner of the stately home is a bit of a sleepwalker. In order for the Panther to steal all he can so he can retire from his servitude, you must help your owner avoid the hazards around his estate and remain asleep while you grab all the trinkets that you can. The game then is a shepherding effort similar to the later Sleepwalker on the Amiga or Eek the Cat on the Super Nintendo, with the Panther using various inflatable tools and his directional bell to steer the napping toff away from potential hazards that will wake him up, thus discovering the silly old puss with his collection of stuff from his house. Well, that's the idea then. And it's quite a good one, I think. Quite original for the time. As I say, it was before Sleepwalker or Eek the Cat or any of those kind of shepherding games. The game though can just go and shove itself up a jaguar's. Why? It's too bastard hard, that's why. Is it a get good situation? Maybe. However, there's little in the way of RZX archive complete playthroughs of the Spectrum version, and there's one of them for nearly every single Spectrum game at this point. Let's take a look at why, using the very repetitive footage I have of this game, because I didn't get very far. There's no time to think or do anything from the very first screen. You have to absolutely peg it 3 screens ahead of where the sleeping boss is, and then you have to inflate a ramp stroke spring and then run back before he collides with a wall, so you can ring your bell so he walks around the wall and then onto the spring. So that doesn't sound too difficult, does it? Well, it bloody well is, and let me tell you why. The ramp stroke spring looks nothing like either of those things. There's absolutely dreadful menu selection controls that not only are very roughly responsive, but do not suspend the relentless march of the advancing sleepwalker. There's no indication what you have to do in the game's manual on this first screen, or via any sort of tutorial, and there's no indication that you can't manoeuvre the chap using the bell around the rug. For some reason this rug is dangerous. It's dreadful. Even with full knowledge of what to do, it is an absolute struggle to get the inflatable spring stroke ramp into place, and sometimes it will just up and disappear for no reason at all after you've laid it. This, remember, is the very first obstacle in the game. I succeeded a couple of times out of about 40 attempts after I'd gained knowledge of how to do it. At this point I knew I was not going to get on with this game, especially as just one collision ends the level you're on. You have to start again. It is without a doubt the most infuriating Spectrum game I've ever played, and I've played Airwolf. There's a few simple things that would have fixed this problem. Number keys could correspond to each of the Panther's tools rather than having to wrestle with combinations of fire and various directions to select the thing you needed in a tight time frame. Clearer graphics rather than the garish mishmash on screen would help with identifying obstacles and tools. Clear instructions in the game's minimalist instruction manual would have helped. A slower sleepwalker that pauses while you're selecting the different objects from your menu screen. How about a few screens of just steering the somnambulist, that is a sleepwalker by the way, about with the bell before introducing the Panther's equipment? You know, to ease you in. I hate this game. I hate it. Hate it. Hate it. It's dreadful. Gremlin have stolen your $8.99 like a pink cat burglar if you bought this. Don't play it. It's not worth it. Crash magazine completely agreed with me. In their issue 57 they awarded it a 34% and summarised, "This Panther's rosy colour must surely be due to appearing in such an embarrassing tie-in." Your Sinclair's issue 35 criticised the game's control system of choosing objects and said, while original, it's a bit of a berm to play. What's a berm? The game got a 5 out of 10 from them. Finally, Sinclair users issue 80 called it a disappointing game of the hip cartoon series, along with an award of just 51%. Quite right too. One of the most alarming things about anthropomorphic animal cartoon characters of any generation of animation is how they dress. Mickey Mouse, for instance, wears shorts, shoes and smart dress gloves. It's very strange. Yogi is especially weird. He wears a green 1950s US office worker's hat and a collar and tie, but with no shirt at all. Imagine a human dressed in such a manner. At best, they'd be an end-performance stripper, and at worst, they'd be a colossal pervert. Oh, and this is his first game on the Specky. Starting out in 1985 as a supporting character for the lesser-known these days Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear is up there with the most popular and enduring characters to come out of Hanna-Barbera Studios. He was apparently based on the character of Ed Norton from The Honeymooners, not to be confused with Ed Norton the First Hulk, but The Honeymooners itself, which was a sitcom that is a reference that means about as much to UK folk as the absolute horror that is candy corn, the confirmed American tradition of torturing children with taste buds. Pretty much like root beer then. Have you ever tried root beer? Jesus Christ, that's disgusting. Stop it, America. Stop it even before you've stopped the gun violence thing. It's horrible. Yogi Bear's name is based on Yogi Berra, a baseball star who also translates well to UK audiences. It's a miracle it did alright over here, really, isn't it? Still, it's easier than renaming it after Danny Bear. Good old Danny Bear. I miss Danny Bear. but not as much as horny Premier League players of the 1990s. The plot of Yogi Bear would usually involve him stealing picnics with his short friend Boo Boo, all while being reprimanded by the authoritative figure of Ranger Smith in Jellystone Park. He would usually attempt it by some sort of subterfuge or by using his ursine cunning. Look, Yogi mate, you are a bear. Just storm towards the campers. Even in your ridiculous stripper's collar and stupid hat, they're gonna be filling their pants with the clay of the bowl. Many series have followed from 1961 to 1991, and of course the inevitable awful CGI movie in 2010, voiced by Dan Aykroyd and Justin Timberlake. If you're thinking about watching it, just don't. Honestly, don't. Yogi Bear's first video game effort was released by Piranha Software in 1987 for your favourite 8-bit computers, the ZX Spectrum, the Amstrad and the Commodore 64. Sorry, Electron owners, but why is that your favourite? If you remember your Yogi Bear game on the Specky looking a little bit different to this, then maybe you're thinking of the two efforts by High-Tech Software, Yogi's Great Escape and Yogi Bear and Friends-ing the Greed Monster. And well, you can see those in a video linked above and probably at the end if I remember. It's one of my best early videos, and people insist on watching my awful Centurions one instead as their first viewing of stuff on my channel, and then they never return. It's no wonder I'm stuck on around 300 followers. This game, just called Yogi Bear, has nothing to do with those games, apart from it being about Yogi Bear, of course. Some human ratbag has kidnapped old Boo Boo and locked him in a cage, and rather than spend the day stealing snacks from the visitors, Yogi decides to do something nice for a change and break his buddy out of the clink. All manner of park-based aggressors stand in the way of Yogi's rescue mission, from frogs to vultures to geezers to, well, geezers. Picnic baskets are left all over the place, which replenish the beast's declining health. And there is a network of caves that provide a handy system of shortcuts should you wish to avoid the many hazards placed around the nature reserve. Always good to see that most 80s of perils quicksand, but not when it leaves a favourite children's character fighting for oxygen. Toffee apples are gathered for an unusual purpose. Rather than supply health benefits for our bear friend, they reveal the order of stepping stones required to finish the game. Quite why these autumnal treats are used for this purpose is not clear, but the monochromatic graphics certainly are clear, and they serve their purpose well. Though the proportions of Yogi just seem a little bit off, especially when compared to the high-tech games. Sound is blippy and very generically low-effort spectrumy, if I'm being honest. Gameplay, well, it's quite middle of the road, and not without its frustrations. Yogi's jump, particularly in this environment where you can walk in and out of the screen, is fairly limp, and it can make leaping across cracks and puddles very tricky. It will take a little while to get used to, let's just say that. Despite being equipped with claw and tooth, Yogi cannot attack his enemies, and the creatures of the park sap Yogi's energy in different amounts, with certain humans straight up murdering Yogi in one hit. Remember your place in the food chain, Bear, for heaven's sake. Collision detection is a little bit shonky too. Whenever Yogi loses a life, he will be transported back to his home cave at the start of the game, which can feel a little bit aggravating if you've made a fair amount of progress. With that said, there isn't a tremendous amount of content in this game, and with a bit of practice you can finish the game in about 6 minutes flat. It can be an enjoyable 6 minutes as soon as you're used to its many quirks, but that's not very much content at all. Yogi Bear is initially very hard, but it's a very unbalanced way of doing difficulty. Hard and short, like an aroused chihuahua. Crash gave Yogi Bear a 62% in their issue 47. They said it is a very hard game aimed at a very young market. Your Sinclair were more positive in their issue 25. They gave the game a solid 8 out of 10 and placed a pun in their summary. Another cartoon conversion, they said. Not quite what it could be, but bear with it. And you should find plenty to keep you amused. Sinclair User gave it a 7 out of 10 in their issue 69, saying it is a rather nice game with convincing yogi graphics. Good fun. And that's the end of that review. The gall of him. Do you see? That's called opening with a joke, kids. The diminutive punchy fella from the small village in 50 BC France had his own computer game of all things. How bright and colourful it is. Barely comprehensible, but that's the Spectrum for you. Yes, it's Asterix. And before we strut our fingers across the dead flesh feeling rubber membrane that is the old 48K, let's just see how we got to this Roman punching scenario in the first place. Asterix the Gaul was the brainchild of writer René Goscinny and artist Albert Uderzo. I'm sorry if I got them wrong, but I can't be bothered to go back and change it. Who have both sadly shuffled off this mortal coil into their graves, both some decades back. Uderzo was the last survivor, and he sold the rights in 2009, and a new team has been penning new material since about 2013-ish. The first time Asterix puffed a Legionnaire into the, air was back in October 1959 in the Franco-Belgian magazine Pilote. The storyline of Asterix ran like this. It's 50 BC France and the Romans have dominated the entirety of Gaul, except for a small village. That village is populated by warriors, powered by a secret serum brewed by village druid Getafix that bequeaths the consumer superhuman strength. That'll get the pickle jar open at Christmas. Cheers, Getafix, old chap. The key protagonists of the tale are Asterix and his rotund buddy Obelix, who seem to venture out a bit more than their fellow villagers, and they usually end up on all sorts of ventures all around Europe and other parts of the world. The foreign types that the pair meet tend to be broad 20th century stereotypes, and a lot of the humour from the series is derived from the duo's encounter with them, along with their nonchalant encounters with the fearful Roman soldiers. They are like honey badgers, are Asterix and Obelix. They just don't give a F. A number of Asterix movies have been produced, mostly of an animated variety, with the majority appearing in cinemas in France, but mostly in the UK. They've debuted on DVD, VHS, or on your old telly box there. That sort of explains why I've tenuously included them in this series. You know, the TV shows with Spectrum games based upon them, because I want to finish at episode 100, and I'm having a big old reach here to make that happen. Asterix is a bit of a merchandise juggernaut in France and the rest of the world, with theme parks, live action movies, an excellent coin-op by Konami, a series of other games on newer formats, and a Netflix TV show. So I guess Asterix still sort of counts as part of this series by the nature of his TV show. Does he? Probably. I make up the rules, and I'm saying he's in. Asterix and the Magic Cauldron was developed by Beam Software for Melbourne House, which was sort of an internal branch of them, to be honest. And it was released for the Amstrad CPC, the Commodore 64, and the Spectrum in 1985. It was advertised using a join the dots puzzle in the magazines, which is quite clever, but also the advert looks almost as visually confusing as the Spectrum game. We'll get to that later though, hold your horses. Australian development and publishing house Melbourne House are probably most famous to Spectrum owners for the Horus series of games and the absolutely rank Double Dragon conversion. Now, I don't hold that against them. They have to put up with all that wildlife in Australia. You try and program a decent conversion of Double Dragon when you could potentially have a spider about to give you a fatal bite on your groin. Or, a shark about to give you a fatal bite on your groin, or a dingo about to steal your baby and about to give you a fatal bite on your groin, or a koala about to bite your groin and give you chlamydia. Not fatal, but not very nice. The plot line in this graphical adventure finds Asterix trying to locate shards of the broken village cauldron. Without it, Getafix cannot give the villagers their magic steroids, and without that, the Romans will just run riot and install like aqueducts and insist on casual omnisexual relationships and roads and medicine and all that. We don't want that. How did the said cauldron break? Well, perpetually super strong chonker Obelix was denied by Getafix when he tried to get an unnecessary sip of that magic soup, so he hoofed it in a fit of pique. I'm telling your mother, Obelix, you're going to be in such trouble. Over 50 screens through village, through forest, countryside, Roman encampment, jail and a gladiatorial arena, the pair must travel, assembling the metal cooking bowl so that the hamlet can rest easy, that they can overpower the encroaching Italian army by cheating and using drugs. Obelix glumly follows Asterix on his quest across Gaul, and the pair have to be fueled by the meat of a boar's flesh. I mean, who can resist the flesh of a pig? Handily, Asterix has done a bit of a packed lunch situation and got 5 bits of meat with him. Should these run out though, the Gallic twosome will have to engage in a set 2 with a wild boar and reduce it to its constituent tasty parts. These encounters and those with the Romans take place in a windowed off screen, complete with energy bars for combatants. A very simplified version, if you like, of Way of the Exploding Fist happens in that window, which makes sense as Melbourne House programmed that game too. Well, I say it's like that, but it's nothing like that at all. I'm just shoehorning in facts that I should have said about Melbourne House earlier on in the review. If you want kind of professional work done, go and watch like Kim Justice or Slope's Game Room or Top Hat Gaming Man. You're not going to get any polish here. The need for the windows is obvious. It's very difficult to make out what's going on in the normal gameplay. Now, the backgrounds are beautiful, really. Walking onto the screen will see your 48K paint such wonderful scenes bursting with colour, with the clash attributed to that controlled via thick black outlines on all of the buildings and trees and things like that. The colour-free sprites are barely distinguishable against them, though. The plain backgrounds on the little windowed-off fight sequences are therefore essential, otherwise you'd be trying to control 15 pubes swirling around in a bathtub of oil. Something I think we've all tried, right? There's an unfinished feel to the game too. If you walk into a certain part of the screen, such as too close to a tree or the back of a building, the two buddies might end up getting stuck, and only a hammer of the reset button will free them. Not so bad when you're emulating like I am, but if you had to play this game from the off, you'd have to wait for the whole thing to load again. And really, is it worth it? Because the gameplay itself, well, it's fairly stock. It's a multi-screen collect 'em up, 10 a penny on Sinclair's machine. While the fighting windows add a little extra texture to the proceedings, it's largely a generic arcade adventure. It's middle of the road, this. Crash in their issue 34 though thought that it could do with a bit more work, as they awarded it a 61%. They said it was a great disappointment, a good looker, but the gameplay could do with a bit of Getafix's potions. Your Sinclair opined this in their issue 12. Somewhere in here is a potentially good game. If only they could have put all those groovy graphics onto a solid framework, it might have been worth playing. As it is, it's a classic case of licensing a character, then merely producing a load of old Gauls. Oh, wait, that's my joke I used at the beginning. You bastards. Anyway, a 5 out of 10 from them. Sinclair user were more impressed than the other two mags. It got a 4 out of 5 from them, and they pointed out that the clever graphics keep the spirit of the cartoon and the gameplay is refreshingly unusual. Sure, if you like getting stuck in buildings, it is, I guess. So to sum it up, it's not great, it's not bad. It's a game you can play without getting too excited either way. In terms of a heart attack causer, it must be a low asterisk. Do you want to know how long The Simpsons has been running for? When it started, I was a year younger than Bart. Now I'm 8 years older than Homer. I've gone from "don't have a cow, man" to being an old man shouting at clouds. Time is relentless and cruel, much like this game's last level. The Simpsons is one of those shows that should require an introduction that says, "This thing exists, you know it exists, like you know that ducks, Germany and hands exist." It's something that you know of. It's an iconic comedy starting in 1987 as a small segment as part of the Tracy Ullman Show in America, and quickly outgrew the Slough-born comedian's US vehicle and became its own thing. The family from Springfield debuted as its own entity in December 1989 and has continued to haunt the airwaves of Fox television ever since. Yes, creator Matt Groening's little sketches as a youth have become an enduring production, a merchandising powerhouse, and a comedy classic to boot. It features endlessly quotable zingers, and if you're my age or a little bit younger, to about the age of, 28 to 30, you've got a favourite Simpsons joke. It's as simple as that. Unquestionably, about 20 seasons past its peak by now, it's still capable of raising guffaws in the odd episode, and is one of the very few shows in this series that I'm doing to have continuously been running up until now, with the other four being EastEnders, Countdown, Mastermind and Neighbours. And the Ramsay Street crew have the black mark on their hands. You're for it, Bouncer. This June, death becomes you. Oh, you died already about 30 years ago. Poor Bouncer. Bart vs. the Space Mutants was originally an NES title released by Acclaim in April 1991, which the software house eventually also released on the three major Sega formats the following year. Ocean had noted the series' increased popularity on the nascent satellite station Sky Television in the UK and purchased the publishing rights for the Acclaim game. This was interesting as their other Sky acquisition, WWF, also had a game by Acclaim on the NES, but Ocean decided to make an original production more closely related to the Technos Japan's arcade game WWF Superstars than WWF WrestleMania or WWF WrestleMania Challenge. Despite being a bestseller, the original NES game wasn't a critical darling, scoring middle tier to above average reviews, so it's strange to see Ocean not come up with something original, or perhaps convert Konami's arcade game instead. The Spectrum conversion was, along with several other versions of the game, developed by Arc Developments, who also worked on the home conversions of arcade titles like Crackdown, Forgotten Worlds and Dragon Breed. Not Lee Carvalho's Putting Challenge or Bone Storm, mind. That's a deeper cut Simpsons reference. Am I doing this review right, mama? Bart vs. the Space Mutants came from a time when the main marketing push from the show was directed towards the rebellious Bart. I mean, do you remember the Bartman song, for instance? All the t-shirts featured Bart Simpson. This is why that generally the main protagonist of the games from the 16 and 16-bit era were generally Bart Simpson, as opposed to any of the other characters. Homer, the dense everyman, eventually became the show's foremost character, particularly as he was clearly the funniest and most developed creation, and especially as the marketing pitch went from children to sort of young adults at that point. So Bart, as expected of a 1991 game, takes the lead here. The town is being besieged by space mutants, unfortunately not Kang or Kodos sadly, and only Bart can see them thanks to his They Live style X-ray specs. So he must valiantly undo the mutants' low-key takeover of Springfield single-handedly before they take over completely and turn Homer and Marge into skin-suited beasts. He can do this in a variety of ways. Using his special glasses, he can spot the rotten space buggers wearing their human costumes and bounce upon their liars' craniums, making them drop a space coin that will eventually prove to the boy's family that he's on the level with them about all this interstellar invasion chit-chat. Quite how coins prove that the space beasts are rampant around the Quickie Mart and other locales around the Springfield area is not clear, but if you can't convince your family with trust alone, you can always pay for their trust with rare space minerals. This is indeed unconditional love. The family will assist in the game's boss battles against alien sympathetic show villains like Nelson and Sideshow Bob in return. The other thing Bart can do to dissuade the xenomorphs from stealing our planet's vital resources is scupper, their Earth-conquering weapon, which requires specific things to run, from hats to balloons to purple things. This is where the puzzle element of the game comes in. For instance, the purple objects in the first level have to be covered, changed to red, or washed of their colour, and Bart does this with a variety of collectibles and items purchased at the shops around his hometown. He has to know what to use, when and where to get this to happen. The game is full of interesting locales. There's a Krusty the Clown theme park, a rather immersive museum that makes the museums that I've been to, in that they're London, seem rather dull in comparison, and a mall full of killer shoes. Now, in terms of The Simpsons, the plot and the creatures such as the sentient Converse are pretty far removed from the pseudo-grounded nature of the show itself, apart from, of course, the Treehouse of Horror episodes. And as a NES game, well, I'm not sure it works. That's a format which had a lot of different environments in its games due to the large development teams from the US and Japan having more resources to make these grand titles, along with a touch more technical heft, of course, from the NES itself. The best kind of platform games on that console, though, they tended to be action titles like Ninja Gaiden, Mega Man, Castlevania, Batman and the Super Mario games. Games like this, they didn't really work as console titles. I mean, I quite like Boy and His Blob, but I can see it's not as good as a Mega Man. But on the spectrum, Bart vs. the Space Mutants feels like it has found its home. With its additional console polish, it genuinely feels like a good to great 8-bit micro game as opposed to a middling NES title. Graphically, it's really sharp, if a bit colour clashy. It's a solid challenge, and aside from a few annoying sections, such as the platforming section in the museum part of the game, or indeed the entire confusing lift mess at the game's finale, and yes, its control system is less than satisfactory at times. But you know what? We're used to that. Us Spectrum owners are used to the odd dodgy control, the slightly unconventional difficulty spike. We like a rough gem. And Bart vs. the Space Mutants is just that. It's not great, but it's really, really good. So stay away from that nasty NES girl Bart. Stay with us. Oh no, we don't want Bart versus the world. Go away, mate. Go back to her. It's all good. In the October 1991 issue of Crash, the game notched a smash and the score of 91%, with Crash summarising that it's a packed arcade adventure ideal for Simpsons fans. In the December 91 issue of Your Sinclair, they thought it was worthy of a mega game, and they told you it was big, tough and lots of fun. Get it and do the Bartman right now. They did, I should note, give it a dismal 59% upon its budget re-release. That's not right, boys, come on now. Sinclair user bequeathed Ocean's Simpsons effort with a Sinclair User Gold Award and stated that the game has a depth that makes Neptune look like a sad, shallow man. Buy this game or you'll eat your shorts. I've always had a strong dislike of the visual design of Mickey Mouse, aka the most famous fictional character in the world, apart from Jesus. He's a mouse, yes, we can see that. We all know that he is a mouse. But he's really weird looking. I mean, just look at him.
His face is bald, with a hairline that's receded all the way from his nose, where a mouse's hairline usually starts, all the way past his eyes, leaving a widow's peak above his eyebrows. And his ears are full of so much dense fur that he can't possibly hear a thing. What's going on with him? And he walks around shirtless most of the time, like a chav on the first warm day of spring. Plus, he's got that weird thing where his design completely changes when it's realised in 3D, hence why the Mickey Mouse mascots that march around Euro Disney look so, I don't know, off. It's the same condition that affects Peppa Pig. I just don't like these costume things when they're supposed to be 2D converted to 3D. They look weird. I mean, Donald Duck's alright, other than the fact that he dresses like a stereotyped 80s gay sailor, only without his pants. When you think about that, he's not really suitable for children's television, is he? It almost seems pointless giving you a rundown on the history of Mickey and Donald. They only vaguely qualify for this list on the basis of their secondary career away from theatrical shorts when they featured on television in things like ABC's 1955 to 1994 Mickey Mouse Club and everyone's favourite sing-along classic DuckTales, A Woo Woo. Incidentally, I am aware of the Spectrum Homebrew 2021 DuckTales game, but I'm not going to cover it here because I'm only covering commercially released TV games that are out during the Spectrum's lifespan, because I want to wrap this thing up before my pubic hair has turned the colour of Disney's first feature film, that being Snow White. A lot of the older 20th century movie shorts became regular programming for a while on ITV and BBC when I was very young, the sort of height where I'd be looking up at doorknobs rather than the age I am now, where I'm forlornly looking down and not being able to see my actual knob. The pair have featured in many movies, TV shows and video games over the past, few decades really, and we're looking at a pair of the very earliest computer games here. Gremlin Graphics took the reins for Baldy Face, with Mickey Mouse the computer game being developed in-house and getting released on the Amiga, the Atari ST, the Commodore 64, the Amstrad and of course the Spectrum in 1988. An unfortunate bit of artwork this perhaps, with Mickey wagging a joystick that's the same colour as his fur at roughly his groinal height. You dirty boy, Mickey Mouse, back to your room. The plotline is that the Ogre King, whoever that is, has taken over Disney Castle, and it's up to the high-pitched rodent to evict the ogre quicker than the council do when they find 7 to 8 children's skulls in your garden. I don't know how they got there, I swear it. Most of the game takes place in this round tower, with the gee-whiz vermin scaling floors and laying waste to ghosts with his water pistol. Presumably that's holy water in there. The ogres must be dealt with an axe, just like that cartoon where Mickey Mouse slaughtered all those children and left them in my garden in particular. That's my excuse, I'm sticking with it. They drop all sorts of power-ups and items, including keys with which Mickey can enter certain doors which lead to different game types. One is a very simplistic side-scroller that has Mickey twatting apparitions, while the floor below him is eroded by these corrosive bubbles. Our beshorted protag smashes his opponents with gusto here. Don't mess with this mouse, he's got claws. Another minigame finds us directly above Disney's cartoon figurehead as he traipses about in a maze attempting to avoid being crushed into rat jam by a perfectly round sphere. It's alright, this minigame, I suppose. The graphics, though predominantly yellow, are excellent really. These sprites, particularly our little avatar here, are decently designed and animated, and though the main part of the game has decidedly samey backgrounds, what with its castle walls and disc-shaped platforms, it's a perfectly serviceable, nay good-looking Spectrum game. Gameplay probably does have a short expiry, but for the initial playthrough, it's charming enough and it's quite fun. Oh Mickey, you're just about better than fine. Mickey, Mickey,
I'll pay your balding face no mind. Hey Mickey, hey Mickey. It's alright, give it a go. Crash gave Mickey Mouse, the computer game, a smash along with a 90% score. They said Gremlins game proves there can be more behind a cartoon licence than just cutesy graphics. Your Sinclair gave it a similarly high rating and praised the graphics, saying that they're not quite Disney standard, but they're as good as you're going to see on a Spectrum screen. They felt that it was well worth forking out for. Sinclair user weren't quite as clap happy for the Cheese Eater. They gave it a 78% and said it's a pretty strong game with very high quality graphics, but thought it was let down a little by its simplicity. Mickey nearly had another couple of games too, courtesy of Disney Software UK. Sadly, Mickey's Crossword Maker and Mickey's Runaway Zoo never saw the light of day, and neither did Goofy's Railway Express or a proposed DuckTales game based on the movie. No, not the 2021 game. Stop quacking on about that one. But one game that did come out was based on our good friend Donald. Donald's Alphabet Chase came out in 1991. It was an edutainment title that was also released on the Amstrad, the Amiga and the Commodore 64. Donald's Alphabet Chase was programmed by Westwood Associates, who, yes, are the same company that would go on to make all those Command & Conquer games as Westwood Studios. I feel somewhat cheated. We were denied a Disneyland-themed Command & Conquer spin-off. I've got to say, graphically, this might well be one of the prettiest uses of monochrome I've ever seen on a ZX Spectrum screen. It is gorgeous. Look how crisp and detailed it is. From background to easily aggravated waterfowl, it's a right Bobby Dazzler. The well-animated Donald is trundling around his house and property, trying to catch the alphabet, which has decided to be all mischievous and raise hell at the duck's normally peaceful residence. It's usually just climbing out of drawers or hiding in cupboards, rather than a U snorting a line off of its cousin in the toilet plumbing area, or a D giving some D to a dirty H and an O. But these visuals come at a terrible, terrible cost. Much like the Giddy Giddy Game Show or the Ormond Cheap Games, these edutainment titles can sometimes be very basic indeed. This game is barely interactive. It is very clearly designed to help very, very small children identify letter shapes and their positions on a keyboard. And, well, not a lot else. One of the letters will flash at the top of the screen, and you must press the corresponding letter on your keyboard when that letter does something rascally in the play area. If you get it, Donald will grab the crafty character and fling it at the heavens. If you miss, he'll inevitably throw something else. Yes, of course, his characteristic Donald Paddy. Once all the letters are cleared, the next well-animated, visually beautiful clutch of iconography appears. And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then Donald claps at you forever for being really smart. Well done for typing the alphabet in order very slowly. And a slow clap for you for wasting your money on a decidedly lightweight piece of software. Donald's Alphabet Chase is absolutely beautiful, but it's as deep as a quark in the atomic structure of a puddle. It is the game equivalent of the hottest cheerleader in a high school movie. It is utterly vapid stuff. No reviews exist in the old magazines of Donald's Alphabet Chase, which means we've brought another Twilight era episode of this series to an end with a soaked sparkler of a finish. So yes, thank you for watching that little compilation. There is still one more of these TV compilation videos, which basically rounds up everything that didn't fit into the other compilations I've done. And that includes soap operas, which you know what that means. Yes, there'll be a video coming that features the EastEnders game. Hooray! Until then, though, thank you for watching this. And please give me feedback on your favourite games from it. Like, subscribe, and Kay, thanks, bye.